Okay, we're in this crucial central chapter of the Tanya. What is the Beinoni? Explaining what is the Beinoni. That he's not a tzaddik, but he looks like a tzaddik. He's definitely not a Rasha, but he's involved with the Rasha more than he wants to be. And he's struggling to be free of his Rasha inclinations. He's got them, what can he do? He didn't choose them. They came to him automatically. He was born with them, and he still didn't outgrow them. To outgrow them, to leave them behind, takes a lifetime. Come in. Takes a lifetime of work and struggle. Okay, Ariel, I'm going to mark you as on time. Special star for the girls who are on time.
I'm sorry, I thought that we were doing the class with Rabbi Pape. So I was like waiting for everyone to come in. And I was like, yeah.
You thought I was teaching there?
No. I thought there was a special class at 9:30, but I thought it was at 8:30.
Okay. So on page 180 at the bottom, we've described in great detail what happens in the morning when the world awakens, and we also awaken physically, and not just physically, but also spiritually. Well, there's Danny Hess, is on the Zoom. Good morning, Danny.
Good morning.
Let's mark you also with a special star for on time. Good. Okay, so we awaken spiritually when especially we feel connected to Hashem when we say Kriya Shema. I told you this lovely clip that someone sent me yesterday of this Israeli soccer player who scored a fantastic goal. And immediately getting up, he reached in his pocket and pulled out a yarmulke, covered his eyes like this and said Kriya Shema. And it was broadcast to the whole world with such a Kiddush Hashem, sanctification of the name of God. You know, Lahavdil Elef Havdalas, when I was a kid growing up in Canada, we used to watch hockey games. And the hockey players from Montreal, they were French Canadian, they were Roman Catholic. And Lahavdil Elef Havdalas, they would get on the ice and they would make a sign of their faith. And I was reminded of this, but you know, it was so completely different. It was just so completely different when this Jewish boy, having scored this terrific goal, just turned to Hashem and said, "Thank you, Hashem. Thank you, Hashem. Hear, O Israel, Hashem is our God." Oh, so nice. Because it just shows how deep is the connection between Hashem, between every single Jew, no matter where he's coming from, and Hashem. You know the well-known story, I'm sure I've told you before, it's such a famous story, that during the 1939, 1940 bombardment of Poland, when the Germans were dropping bombs everywhere, it was terrifying. People ran into shelters, and there were, maybe 1,000 or more Jews in one underground shelter. It was a subway station. And a bomb dropped near the mouth of the station, and everybody, they weren't religious people, most of them. There was a lot of assimilation in Europe at that time, a lot of assimilation. There were a handful of Hasidim were there, and the Rebbe himself, and everybody shouted out together with one voice, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Because when you dig down deep enough in the Jewish psyche, that's what you find. If you dig deep enough, you're going to find oil. You dig down deep enough in the Jewish psyche, you're going to find Hero Israel. Hashem is our God. Okay, and especially when we say Shema in the morning, we're connected to that. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. With all your heart means with your good inclination, even your evil inclination, and with all your soul, with all your heart, with all your soul. I mean, even if they take your life, you're not going to compromise your belief in Hashem. And with all your money. A lot of people, their money is more dear than their life. I have a friend, Beryl Futterfass, who used to have, good morning, Esther, he used to have a jewelry store in London. And one time he had a robbery and he wasn't in the store. And his wife, Mrs. Futterfass, told me she was so happy her husband wasn't in the store. Because had he been in the store, he might have fought to save his money. And they could have killed him. She felt it was a miracle he wasn't in the store. Baruch Hashem. Because with all your might means with all your money, with everything you've got. What is everything you've got? It's your money. Okay. So after davening, what happens? After davening, this feeling of connection to Hashem dies down. It wanes, becomes dim, the light isn't so strong, and so the evil creatures come creeping back in. The Yetzer Hara with all his helpers, all his agents. Yetzer Hara doesn't have helpers, he has agents. Yeah, Yetzer Haras don't help anybody. You get that, Rachel? Yetzer Hara agents don't help anybody. They're very selfish. They only want to help themselves. They're agents. They're not helpers. Forgive me, have a sip of coffee. So what happens? The Yetzer Hara comes rushing back in as the lights go dim on stage. You are the central actor, you're on stage, the lights go dim, and the Yetzer Hara helpers, agents, come rushing back to retake control of the city, which is you. You are like a city-state. However, you do not abandon your control of the city, and therefore the Yetzer Hara cannot just become a king and a dictator in your life. He will definitely want to try to take over and control you in page 181, your actions, your speech, and your thoughts. And he's going to want you to continue here, continuing. He's going to want you to think deeply. The Yetzer Hara is going to try to make a person now, after he's davened. When you were davening, you were inspired. Now you're not inspired anymore. The Yetzer Hara wants to refocus your attention. You should think deeply about what you want to have now for breakfast. A banana, a cup of coffee, whatever it should be. But Tanuge Olam Hazeh, pleasures of the world. The mashpiyim, the teachers in the yeshivas, they teach the boys that your desire for pleasures of the world is the opposite of your goals in spiritual sensitivity. And they're in direct contradiction. So therefore, what does a chassid do? I have these desires. I do desire a banana. I do desire a yogurt. It helps me get through the morning. Okay, so then you have to just sort of focus your mind and say, I'm eating this in order to serve Hashem. That saves the day. That one little thought that you give a motivation and a meaning and to your desires for pleasures of the physical world, that saves you from becoming addicted to them. Addiction is a terrible thing. Addiction is a tyrant, right? Addiction runs the life of the person who is an addict. And there are hundreds of kinds of different addictions. A person can be addicted to seeing things, addicted to hearing things, addicted to saying things, addicted to doing things. Whatever gives him physical pleasure. So therefore, what you want to do, you want to just rein in a little bit, like a horse. Hold it in, hold back. Whoa, boy, hold him back, and just say, I'm doing this in order to be able to serve Hashem. And you know what they used to do? I was told by Hasidim when they were trained, when they were little children, their mother trained them to leave a little bit on the plate. Leave a little bit over of your favorite food. You don't have to go on a diet. In other words, don't get the wrong idea. You know what asceticism is? An ascetic is a person who scorns any physical pleasure. He leads a life of restrictions. He doesn't allow himself any pleasure whatsoever. Well, Hasidim aren't like that. Hasidim do allow themselves pleasures, but they focus them so they can use their pleasures for the service of Hashem. I mean, what would a Chabad house be if it didn't offer good meals? Avraham Avinu used to offer good meals. We shouldn't offer good meals. Because even it says in the Talmud that offering good meals brings the hearts of people closer. So we have to use this in good ways. So the Yetzer Hara wants the person to focus his attention now after davening on what am I going to have now for breakfast that's going to give me a lot of pleasure during the day. To think deeply into it. What are all the things that I need to get during the day? However, the Yetzer Hara does not succeed. We're talking about a Beinoni. In the Beinoni's life, he does not succeed in seducing the mind of the Beinoni. Bottom of page 181. Because the mind, the brain rules over the heart. Like we were saying yesterday, this is rule number 1 in Hasidic philosophy. That all the inclinations of our heart must come under the inspection of the intellect. They have to be inspected before they can go out. They have to pass inspection. There's another story which I've told. Some of you will remember it. I don't think Danny has heard the story. Good morning, Shira. That there was a spy. He was a chassid, his name was Moshe Meisels. He was a chassid of the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe engaged in the war that took place between Russia and France. When France was really taking over Europe under the dictatorship of Napoleon. Napoleon was conquering one country after another. He was a fabulous warrior. He drove his people to do things that other armies could not do. And he was able to take them by surprise and conquer them. And he tried to conquer Russia. And the Alter Rebbe, many Jewish leaders welcomed him because he abolished the ghettos. He abolished the segregation of the Jewish people from society. He made the Jewish people mainstream citizens of every country. The Alter Rebbe felt this was not a good thing. He felt that, number one, it would lead to massive assimilation, which it did. And this was the beginning of the intellectual movement called the Enlightenment in Judaism, which means, enlightenment means assimilation, becoming non-Jewish in your ways. And it would lead to revolution. He felt it would lead to all kinds of revolutions. And therefore he fought against it. He dedicated his efforts to help the Tsar, even though in Russia, the government was very anti-Semitic. There were pogroms. There were all kinds of anti-Jewish policies. But better the stability of the monarchy than the instability of what France was offering. And he felt that by fighting against Napoleon, he pushed off revolution. Revolutions took place throughout Europe in the 19th century. Every country overthrew its rulers and its monarchs. They killed them. They set up new other forms of tyrannical governments, which led to fascism in the 20th century. Fascism. Fascism, you know what that is? These are the Mussolini and Hitler, Yamach Shemoy, Franco in Spain, all the dictators of Europe. They replaced the kings and the squires and the nobility of the previous generation. So the Alter Rebbe felt that by fighting against Napoleon, he pushed off revolution in Russia by 50 years. So we find in the 1840s and 1850s, revolution is the political phenomena in Europe. Violent revolutions, which came to Russia 50 years later. In 1918 was the Russian Revolution. Well, its consequences were very serious. Very, very serious. The persecution of the Jewish people and Judaism, even by Jews, after the Russian Revolution, by those people who embraced revolution as a new salvation, a new way of life. So Moshe Meisels worked for the Alter, was a chassid of the Alter Rebbe, and he helped the Alter Rebbe in his efforts to combat Napoleon, and he was spying on Napoleon. And one time Napoleon was meeting with his generals, and he was aware that there was a leak. Information was leaking out. And when he would go to surprise the Russian army, take them by surprise and conquer them, they would be prepared for him. Why were they always prepared? How did they know what was happening? Well, the answer is that Moshe Meisels was sneaking out information, secret information. What was he doing there? He was a translator. The French didn't speak Russian. When you invade a country, when America fought against Saddam Hussein in Iraq, they had to have Iraqis guiding them, showing them where to go, and people who spoke the language. So an invading country always has to have informers who will help. And Moshe Meisels, that's how he insinuated himself into the French camp. And Napoleon sees this Jewish person hanging around when he's having a big meeting with his generals, and he senses what it's all about. He just turns and rushes over to him, puts his hand on his heart, and says, "You're a spy." Puts his hand on his heart to feel, is he going to panic? And Moshe Meisels, his heart didn't skip a beat. His mind controlled his heart so much that he just thought, "What are you talking about? I don't know what you mean. I mean, I'm a translator here. Well, don't hang around this tent anymore. And he sent him away. But if he had lost his self-control, if his face had gone white, if he looked frightened, then Napoleon would have killed him on the spot. They asked him afterwards, "How did you do that?" He says, "Rebbe Moshe, how did you maintain your self-control?" Just because this is the first thing that we learned from the Alter Rebbe, is your mind has to control your heart. Hanabin, I'm sure you've heard that story before.
Many times.
Many times. Not enough. As many times as you hear it, you can always hear it again. It's such a powerful story. Page 181, because the brain rules over the heart, as is written in Raya Mehemna, in Parshas Pinchas, which we mentioned yesterday. The Parshas Pinchas is about how the Jewish people succumbed to the lures and temptations of the Midianite women and the terrible consequences it had. So this becomes like an archetypal example of how the mind has to rule over the heart and not to be seduced by the agents of the Yetzer Hara, in this case, the maidens of Midian. He goes on to explain, Shekach noitzer ha'adam. That's how people are created. B'toldosei, innately. Kol adam yachol b'ratzoynei shebemoichei l'sapek. Every person has the power in his mind and has the willpower to control himself. V'limshol, and rule over the ruach, the spirit of desire that is in his heart. Turn the page. On page 182. And to control his natural desires. So the argument of today's generation is, I'm Hashem, if God made me this way, you can't blame me for it. And we glorify in the press, in the media, glorifies people who indulge all their desires. We make heroes out of them. You're not allowed to refer to men and women anymore. Everything is one, we're one sex. So the basis of stable society are marriage and family. This is a campaign it's being waged against morality and the stability of the family. The men can marry men. People can change their sex. As long as your heart wants it, it's good. Because Hashem made you that way, so it's good. No, it's not. Hashem also gave us rules of how to behave in a moral and ethical way. And when we behave morally and ethically, it brings blessing and stability into the world. And the opposite causes instability, tyranny, and cruelty, and selfishness. What?
So like,
You have a question?
yeah.
Yes.
So I understand that Jewish people can't do that, but Goyim don't have Torah. So like, we're mocking them, yes, but like
Goyim do have Torah.
they have the 7 Noahide laws,
Yes, and that includes that.
not to change your gender,
Yes.
which law?
Sexual morality. Not to commit adultery brings with it all the laws of what we understand as sexual morality. These are laws that were given to Noach. These are the universal laws of all mankind. This is the basis of stability in society. If you don't have that, you have a jungle.
Do they know it means that?
Are they educated about this? No, they're being educated about the opposite. They're being told that the opposite is good. And unfortunately, Jewish people are always in the lead of things. So some of the first people to legally get married were Jewish men here in New York. They led the way
So technically, because they
to sensual freedom. I'm free to do anything that I want.
So they do have 7 laws. Does that mean by going against those laws, they are committing theirs?
Yes. Yes, these laws were given at Mount Sinai to all the people in the world. Part of our mission and our job is to educate the world. It was never possible until recently because the Jewish people did not have a voice. we were a repressed and persecuted people. And recently, one of the things that comes with this is that we can speak to the peoples of the world, and the certain nations accept it. These laws were given, therefore they are called universal laws, and part of our job before Moshiach comes is to publicize the 7 laws of morality. And one of these laws is sexual morality, and that involves spilling one's seed and not having a family with children. I mean, we see in the Torah, before the Torah was given, the sons of Yehuda, Tamar was his daughter-in-law, daughter of Shem, who was the Kohen, Shem, the son of Noach. She was so beautiful, they didn't want to spoil her beauty by giving her children. And the Torah says very clearly, they died immediately for it. They were very holy people. And, when you have a very perfectly tuned automobile, and something goes wrong, the whole thing doesn't work. So what Er and Onan were their names, and they quote unquote spilled their seed and perished. Clear lesson to all mankind. And then these laws were given again at Mount Sinai. And it's an interesting thing, Nicole, that you have to know that the 7 universal laws, when a person takes upon himself to be a righteous Gentile and says, I accept upon myself to the 7 universal laws, which were given by God through Moshe Rabbeinu at Mount Sinai. They're not just laws that we follow because they make sense or because they're the basis of a righteous society. That happens to be true, but we follow them because they are also given through Moshe Rabbeinu at Mount Sinai. A person wants to be a righteous Gentile, doesn't want to become a Jew, wants to lead a righteous life. He takes upon himself, he has to consciously know that this is connecting him to Moshe Rabbeinu, and that's his connection to Hashem. Same as Jewish people. In fact, in actuality, there's not a lot of difference between all the ramifications of those 7 laws and the laws that the Jewish people keep. The differences are mainly in the ritual laws of Shabbos and Yom Tov and Kashrus. But all the civil laws are contained under the umbrella of those 7. Those 7 laws contain about 60, 70 other laws, that each one of which is a mitzvah in the Torah. For the Jewish people, has a separate mitzvah. But they're contained under the umbrella of these 7 laws.
So what if someone is never properly educated?
What? How can they become properly educated?
I'm saying, like, what if someone was never properly educated? They're
Right.
committing a videos every day.
Right.
They go to Shemayim. You know what I'm saying?
What's going to be?
A lot of these goyim are not educated at all.
Correct. Well, when a person does something and he doesn't know that he's doing it. Let's say a person, give you an example. A person, you have laws of Shabbos. Don't turn the lights on and off on Shabbos. Don't make a fire. So a person, hey, aren't you on Zoom? Anyway, welcome, Danny. A person does a transgression, whatever it may be. And someone comes and tells him, you're really not supposed to do that. He says, I don't care. And he does it again. Okay, so in the times when the temple is standing, he has to bring an offering, an atonement to make up for his transgression. Now, if he does it again and again and again and again, many, many times, but he's not warned, he was just told once, and he did it many times. How many offerings does he have to bring? One offering for all the times. It's only one. He forgot. I didn't know that that's what it really meant. So I thought it was okay. So he did it many times. When he learns that it's not okay, he has to bring one offering to atone. It's called a sin offering, an atonement offering. Now, what happens if he does it one time and his friend comes back a week later? He says, "You're still doing that. I told you last week. It's not right. You're not supposed to do that." Oh, I forgot. He comes back a week later and he says, "What? I reminded you twice already. You're still doing it. No, don't do it anymore. Don't do it anymore. It's not right. It's not right. It's not the right thing to do." Oh, okay. And then he does it again. And he keeps on doing it and getting more and doing it again. So now he has to bring an offering for every time. Because every time is a different occurrence. Until now, just had one forgetting. Now he had 4 forgettings. He forgot 4 times. The idea in Nicole became very popular, popularized a lot by Jewish lawyers, is temporary insanity. I forgot. People forget all the time. I knew, but then I forgot. So I did it. And you can't say, well, I was warned. I forgot. That's a valid complaint in Jewish court. And that's why very few people were ever executed in the Jewish court. Because they always found reasons why the person didn't realize what he was really doing, didn't realize what he was doing. To do a thing, malice aforethought, is very, very hard category to fulfill. You have to have people that you respect and admire warning you at that very moment, and you have to do the crime within 10 seconds. See, there's no room for forgetting. So a person, like you just said, does something wrong over and over and over and over again, he's responsible for one thing. However, in the school systems today, and as they were before, people have been taught the basic laws of morality. A kid may grow up in a gang, and in this gang, he may do all kinds of crimes, but he learned somewhere along the way, his parents took him to church, or he went to school, and he was taught, you're not allowed to kill somebody else. You're not allowed to steal. You're not allowed to rape somebody else. And the Rebbe instituted this wonderful campaign, which is accepted more and more widely, of a moment of silence. To take a moment before school begins for 30 seconds or 60 seconds to think about the reality that you are standing before your Creator. And I have video clips of this, of parents and teachers and kids speaking about how it changes their day. They get all the anger and frustration out of their system before the day starts, and they perform much better. And this is something that we never used to be able to do such a thing. The world didn't permit it. And now that it is permissible, it's possible, we have a responsibility to work in this area. It's a very admirable thing to do. I have a friend, his name is Avram Frank, and he's not a shliach, but he has dedicated himself to do this. And he meets with principals in schools, and they institute it in the school. They're very welcoming of the whole concept of a moment of silence. The Jewish people fought against it. Liberal Jews fought against it because they didn't want their children to be taught Christianity. So therefore the Rebbe was very careful in describing how this should be conducted, that each person prays to whomever he or she wishes. You're not told how to pray. You're just told to think about the fact that there's a Creator and they're responsible for what they do before the Creator. And that's the basis of all morality. Okay, continuing. I hope I answered your question. Or did I give you inspire more questions? A good answer inspires more questions. So the mind can rule over the heart, and the Beinoni is so much controlling, is so much struggling in this arena. Sholei Lamolis Mashailas Libe, he is struggling to control himself, not to fulfill every random desire that he feels like. B'maisa dibur u'machshava. Thought, speech, or deed. There was a famous case a few years ago. A woman, a girl, a young lady was running in Prospect Park, running around, and a gang of 4 or 5 teenagers grabbed her, dragged her into the woods, and had a good time. Now, they knew that that wasn't right, or else they wouldn't drag her into the woods, would they? The person doing something wrong doesn't want anybody to see. So they knew it was wrong. Eventually they were caught and persecuted, and the poor woman has to live with it. So what's required is the person, even though he has these instincts, and they could say, well, they're natural instincts, so they must be good. No, they're not good. Even animals don't do that. But the Beinoni struggles with his instincts, with his desires, and he has the power to control these instincts. And how do you control? A person asks the teacher, how I can't control my instincts. They're very powerful. I have very powerful drives in my heart. I can't control them. Hashem made me like this, and I can't control it. Says the Alter Rebbe, that's not true. You can control it. Your mind rules over your heart, and how do you control it? Think of something else. When a person is fantasizing about all his or her desires with the most attractive and appealing object of their desire, and they can't control themselves, and they know it's not right, and they know it's not going to work out, it's not going to happen, so they're just teasing themselves and wasting their time. You think about something else. But I can't stop thinking about my desire. Just a second. And the proof of this is that when a person desires something very strongly, let's say you see a picture flashes in front of your eyes and it pops up on your computer screen, a pornographic picture, and it bothers you. You keep thinking about it, and then you get a phone call that your mother, heaven forbid, just fell ill and they rushed her to the hospital. And you should come home right away. You don't think about that picture anymore. And this shows you that you can think about something else. Therefore, a person should prepare things that you really like and have a whole gallery of things that you like very, very much that you can think of when you feel pressure to think about something you know is wrong, and you turn it off and you think about something else. You can't think about two things at the same time. Yes, Hanabina.
Making me feel guilty about the cupcake I ate this morning.
About the cupcake you had? Don't feel guilty. Use the energy to have a sweet day.
Oh, yeah.
Say, thank you, Hashem. I'm sure you said a bracha before and after. Thank you, Hashem, for this cupcake. This is enabling me to have a sweet day. That's the trick. Put a different spin on it and it becomes holy. I love cupcakes. And forget about the shear and forget about everything. Just think about the cupcake, then it's not so good. This cupcake is going to help me during the day. Thank you, Hashem, for this cupcake. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. That's the whole point. That's the point of this lesson. It's the point of Hasidism. It's the point of our lives. Our mind has to rule over our heart. Lesson number 1 of Hasidic philosophy from the Baal Shem Tov, from the Talmud. My children, we picked up the idea from Hasidim to train our children to leave over 1 spoonful. I met him, he was a Baal Tshuva, I met him on the 5th day of Av, 1975. When the Rebbe said we should go, that's the yahrzeit of the Arizal. We read about in the Tanya. The Rebbe said, go visit the Arizal. He's in Sfas. He's buried in Sfas. And they supplied buses. I was sitting beside this guy. He told me he had yechidus with the Rebbe. He told the Rebbe that he had begun fasting Mondays and Thursdays. And he thought the Rebbe was going to pat him on the shoulder and tell him that he's a good little chassid. And instead, the Rebbe criticized him severely and said, you know that the Alter Rebbe does not allow fasting. You're not allowed to fast. So he was crushed. He wished he'd never opened his mouth. Because fasting makes you self-centered and egotistical, and it diminishes your ability to learn. So it's a transgression. You're not learning when you could have learned Torah. So he thought, oh my, I'm really in trouble now. So then the Rebbe had mercy on him. The Rebbe smiled. He said, but he said, if you really want to continue in this line of refining your character, I would give you this piece of advice. This is what the Rebbe said. He says, when you're in the middle of eating something that you really like, leave over 1 spoonful. He turned to me, he said, it's easier to fast the whole day than to leave over 1 spoonful. That way you get the nourishment that you need, and you don't just do it because of your desires. So therefore, Hasidim very often train their children to leave over a spoonful. So when my children, when my wife would feed the children and there was something on the plate that they didn't like, they didn't want to have it, so we used to say, leave over that spoonful for the Yetzer Hara. Let the Yetzer Hara enjoy it. So they would say about the food that they didn't want, like spinach or whatever. Well, that's for the Yetzer Hara, Mom. You'll try to get the better of it. Okay, we got here. Let's take attendance before we go. Sarah Cohen didn't show up. Very unusual. She's usually here. Esther Baylor, not. Hannah Bina, yes. Hannah Sternberg, not. Donnie has yes. Nicole, yes. Esther, yes. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you, Rabbi. It was beautiful.
Who said that?